Oop. Gonna move that guy around. I don't know what it is. Even when I think I'm gonna be early, I always find like some way to waste like a bunch of time. I'm like so good at that. It's my hidden talent. Okay, wait, let me I might need to do this. Okay. Maybe that'll be good for... Anyway, make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all the good stuff. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you are 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. And with that, we will go to the very first guest.
Oh, I missed your secondary prompt. I was going to ask about pantheism. You could drop me.
Oh, about what? Oh,
like
no.
Pantheism.
Pantheism?
No, baretheism, just like the proposition.
Like, oh no, you can exists. If you have an argument for baretheism, I'll
I was
hear
just
it.
wondering, like, do you have like a contention against that?
I think I'm inclined to. So it depends what view you take on it. So I think that there's like certain objects that are uncreatable. Like for example, I don't think that time can be caused into existence. Maybe somebody would take the view that God like emanates time, and I don't think I'd have a problem with that view. But I mean, with respect to something like the causation of time into existence, I think I'd take an issue with that.
I mean, you could probably still ascribe to like B theory of time and still like I agree that intelligent mind exists.
I guess so. Okay, maybe you could help me out with this because I think that there's like a whole bunch of paradoxes that arise about time potentially coming into existence. So changes are events. If the change occurs, then events exist. They must, because change is the type of thing that happens. If nothing happens, then nothing changes. So if something changes, then something happened, which means that all change is necessarily going to be connected to like some sort of event, which means that in order to go from like an eventless state to a state that has events, there's going to need to be some sort of event that takes place in the eventless state, which seems to be a contradiction. So it seems like you're always going to end up with the conclusion that there never was some state of affairs where there was no time, because if events exist, then time exists. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I think so. I'm not really sure if I would grant that an eventless state is going to be like possible, like metaphysically, but...
Sure, then it would seem like you'd probably just agree that like time isn't the sort of thing that... I mean, I think you'd probably have to commit yourself to saying like at least like creation ex nihilo. Like maybe you want to say like the timeline has always existed and God didn't really have like free will to create it. But yeah, like, presumably in this state, like if an eventless state is not possible, then that means time always existed.
Yeah, but what do you mean by time?
I would take that to be like the sequence of events from past to present to future.
Okay, so I mean, I would say the God model I'm proposing wouldn't have to exist like atemporally. It could exist within time, like so time wouldn't be a factor.
Sure, then I think probably what you'd have to commit yourself to is the view that God didn't create time. But then also there's like certain like Augustinian worries that arise about it doesn't seem like God has any more reason to create at this time as opposed to some other time. So it seems like he couldn't be perfectly rational because he has no reason to create it now as opposed to like a second before.
Well, how do we know that? I'm confused by that.
So we would take like reasons to be like some sort of, I don't know, like some sort of like fact related to like the current state of reality. If nothing changes, if nothing comes into existence, then the set of reasons that you have for action are just the same.
Yeah, I suppose.
So then,
would that give you like enough credence to say that God is irrational?
Because if God's doing things for no reason, then yeah.
I mean, I could do something for no reason, as long as it doesn't like cause me harm or really affect me in any way. I wouldn't consider it to be irrational.
I think I disagree with that. I think that if you do something for no reason, it's irrational. Like it doesn't. I don't think it needs to like harm you for it to be like irrational. I would take irrational to be something like done without reason.
Done without reason. How would you define rationality then? Is it like an irrational act?
Probably like something related to like reason's responsiveness.
What do you mean by reason's responsiveness?
Your you recognize like certain reasons to do certain things, and then you respond appropriately.
Okay, so by your definition, I agree then. If you define it that way, then I would agree that God not creating the universe, like creating the universe at this specific time, would be irrational.
Sure. Yeah. I guess, I'm not sure. Do you think we disagree on anything?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
We're trying to come to the answer together here, but I would drop now and let you talk to atheists if you want.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for coming on up. I always love talking to people who are like more informed, oftentimes that, well, I'm sure. I mean, if you watch, you'll see. But yeah, thanks for coming on. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen share with your friends, doing all that good stuff. Whoa, very good wizard. Thanks so much for the super chat. Is it too early for super chat? Yes, it is. Why would you? How could you do that? Noel Gory, thanks so much for the cool Corey membership. Appreciate you. That dude was chill. He also, like a lot of people who would be willing to defend like bare theism would probably just like muscle past like the request that it be like a specific god, but no, that's like chill.
Says I.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going? How old are you?
I'm 28.
What religion? I'm sorry, that was a dumb question. There's literally a cross in your bio.
It's okay. Well, I would consider myself non-denominational, I guess. Broad.
Sure. What makes you think God exists?
I believe that God exists regardless of personal experiences, which can be always subjective. But like, just because I feel like science somewhat complements God's existence, and I also believe that there's a lot of things that science can't prove necessarily, but on the other side, I have had times where I've had questions about, like, kind of what you were saying before I was listening. You're familiar probably with Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, religion and the afterlife is all kind of a cause and effect nature of what we've been kind of evolutionized to think about. When something dies, it decomposes and then turns into new life, right?
So, I'm kind of inclined to think that Carl Jung's model of like religious development doesn't really seem to map on to a lot of like Eastern religions, where Carl Jung sees religion as like a way of like actualizing the self. But then if you go to like a lot of Eastern religions like Buddhism or Hinduism,
it's the absence of self. Almost.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that one of the critical errors that Carl Jung makes is that he doesn't really seem to be accounting for like Eastern religions when he goes about his psychoanalysis. But okay.
I definitely agree. So
sure.
A lot of the times I have questions, even though I am a Christian, because I, past my own experiences. I feel like it's well known that we don't know everything about science, and it changes all the time, and there's things that we can't explain.
But why would we infer God from that, I guess?
At the same time, I feel like maybe there's some times where we feel like we're just kind of compartmentalizing what we don't know into a higher power. You understand?
I mean, I would agree with that. Like, I think God is like, yeah, I totally agree with that. But I mean, just because we do that, why would I think that it's true? I mean, in fact, I think that we can make like a good historical case to think that that's false. People have been compartmentalizing the things that they can't explain into God for as long as there's been things to explain that they didn't have answers for. That's why we created like Poseidon to explain the tides and Zeus to explain the lightning. But as science has progressed, these things like keep on rolling back. It just seems like we could make like a bit of a bit of an induction and assume like, if things continue at this rate, eventually all the things that people want God to be able to explain will just be able to have other explanations for. So, I mean, at that point, like, why would we think that God would be a best explanation just because we were not sure about something?
I definitely understand that. But the only thing that I kind of have to say about that is that regardless if you believe in science or whatever you believe in, I'm very, I have a lot of questions, and I'm a deep thinker. So I just feel like, and along with scientific explanations, that God has to exist, because it just seems like if you look at, as far as like dark energy, dark matter, with astronomy, there's a lot of evidence pointing towards something that is being controlled.
How?
Way,
Why?
just the way that like dark matter, dark energy, how things are completely, there's no answers for a lot of things right now. And
well, wait, can I?
supernatural has to
I'm
exist.
not really sure. Okay, wait. I feel like I feel like you're not making very specific claims.
Okay.
So you're saying like it's not explained. I guess I'm not sure. Like, first of all, I think that we have like a decent understanding. It's evolving, but we have like a decent understanding of things like dark energy and dark matter. We know that like the properties that we ascribe to it. But let's say we had no idea what it was. Why would I think that God exists? Because we're not sure.
So the thing that kind of defers me from believing solely in science is that it does change. It is ever evolving. They have already confirmed that whatever is controlling this dark energy, dark, mass, is being controlled very, like, what do they call, like, I don't know, like it's very precise, and they can't hit that wall, if you know what I'm talking about. When it comes to dark energy, dark mass, there's this wall that,
I have no. I'm honestly I have no idea what you're talking about. But maybe what we could discuss is like the fact that you say you don't want to believe in science because science changes. Well,
I do believe in science to a certain extent, for sure.
But the fact that it changes is like really good. If religion had the ability to change over time, that would make religion much better, because as things currently stand, you have a Bible, and that Bible never changes, and it gets like a ton of things wrong about the book itself. Like, it's confused about its own contents because it was written by various people across history, and they just like misrepresent like other portions of it. It's confused about like the scientific world around us. It says, for example, that rabbits chew cud, that rock badgers chew cud. Neither of them do. It says that pi has a value of 3. I mean, if the Bible was able to change and update itself, that would be really beneficial for it, because it gets tons of things wrong. Why would I want to believe the thing that gets stuff wrong but can't change, as opposed to the thing that gets stuff right, and if it doesn't, it will change to be in line with the correct views?
No, I totally understand that. That's why I'm in that impasse right there. Like, science changes. There's things, that I don't understand in the Bible at all, or, whatever. But do you, honestly, if I can ask you a question, do you believe that science in any state can disprove or prove the existence of God in its
No, I've never made that
entirety?
claim.
No, I was asking
No.
you just. No, I didn't think you made the claim, just personally.
Yeah, I think that that's more of a philosophical question. So if you wanted to talk about like reasons to think that God doesn't exist, we could talk about philosophical problems, like, for example, the problem of evil. We have all of this horrific natural suffering, things like earthquakes, cancers, mosquitoes that carry malaria, kill billions of people. If God is all good and he designed the laws of nature, then we would expect him to design morally perfect laws of nature that couldn't possibly be improved. But he didn't. There's easy ways to improve these laws of nature.
So in my personal belief, I believe he did. It's just the fall of mankind that skewed this. But that doesn't mean that he won't restore it.
Sure. So I have a
Because of the
question.
sin. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
No, you're
ahead.
totally fine. I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So we know for a fact that dinosaurs had cancer because we have a dinosaur bone that has cancer. It has bone cancer on it. There's like the tumor on it.
Right.
You know,
And what period is this?
it's I think like 80 million years ago. I
Triassic,
can verify.
Triassic, Jurassic.
Dinosaur bone with cancer. It's from 77 million years ago.
So that would be Jurassic. No,
Okay.
Triassic. I don't know. What is that one?
Jurassic era. No, it would be after the Jurassic era.
Okay. Just what era is this? And then type in the time.
What era
is?
is
Yeah.
75 million years ago?
Mhm.
Cretaceous, maybe?
Okay, Cretaceous. Okay,
No, I think
perfect.
it's. Sorry, I think it's Mesozoic. In terms of.
So slightly before Cretaceous.
Well, so it seems like Cretaceous is like a rock.
It's more of the sea bearing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I guess so that's interesting. They have these two eras that like overlap. Not sure
Right.
why. I'm sure there's a good reason, but
Right.
yeah. Regardless, it happens in both of them, I suppose.
Okay.
So, how would you explain the fact that this occurred millions of years, like cancer exists millions of years prior to the fall of man?
Because of the radiation.
Mhm.
Very simple. That's
Yep.
actually why I asked you with the time period, the radiation. There is a natural incline and decline of the atmospheric pressures and the like the ice age and the heating and things like that. So the UV lighting was horrible during the crustacean period.
Why would God do that?
Because he has a plan.
Oh, for the dinosaurs?
Even with the dinosaurs, yes, I do believe that.
Okay. I mean that's kind of strange, right? Like, why did the dinosaurs deserve to
strange,
suffer?
Of course. Well, I don't feel like the thing that I hold on to is that we don't know the mind. If you take for example, if you do believe in if you did believe in a creator that knew more than you, exactly his plan, and you are just a part of his plan and good. I have tons of questions like, okay, well, what about, like the fact that all of the dinosaurs died during, they had all, I don't forget I forgot what it's called when they had like a drowning, they almost had like a drowning type, where their skeletons looked, I don't know. Anyways. It's hard to understand all of the mysteries of nature, regardless of if you don't believe in God or not. But I choose to believe with God because it makes sense. There's a creator. It just does to me.
Not a good one. If you look at the evolutionary history, it's billions of years of horrific suffering. I mean, in a couple of years ago, there was like the Australian bushfires and billions of lizards got incinerated. A horrible way to die. Tons of koalas got incinerated. This is like an agonizing event across like a variety of animals. And that's just one instance of that. I mean, evolutionary history is billions of years long, full of exactly that type of suffering happening over and over and over again on repeat. It doesn't seem like a good God would allow or would create such horrific animal suffering.
I agree. Honestly, I really do. But the thing that I do understand is that God created us to have free will. There was sin, and honestly, the creation that is here was made by God, so he has more of a profound love for them than we do. And he also has a place where they are meant to be. We are not meant to be in a world where there are pain, where there is pain, where there is suffering, where there is death, sadness, all these things. It is a effect. It's an effect. God cries over things that, we wouldn't even be able to fathom. He cares about all of his creation, and just because it's death on this earth doesn't mean there's death in the afterlife.
Sure. So a reason why I don't think that's true is because God is perfectly empathetic. He's maximally empathetic. And we know from our experience that as people get more empathetic, they're more averse to suffering, not less averse to suffering. So if God is maximally empathetic, we should also expect him to be maximally averse to suffering, because the more empathetic you get, the more opposed to suffering you are, which means that all of the suffering is just good evidence against God. He couldn't be a maximally empathetic being, because then he would be opposed to this suffering.
He is opposed to suffering.
Then why doesn't he stop that? Why did he need billions of years of animal torture?
Because it's our choice that we made that to be. Sin was involved in this world.
The animal torture? Like the billions of years of animals tearing each other to shreds? Or
it's not about it's about the sin of the world is a disease of the world.
But what about
It's
prior
a
to
disease of the
humans?
world.
Humans have only come about in the last couple 100,000 years, so it's still true. For 4.4 billion years, maybe even 4.5 billion years, there's been this horrific suffering in the world, and that had nothing to do with us. That must have been God's decision in your view, but that seems incompatible with him being maximally empathetic, because a maximally empathetic God would be opposed to that.
Of course, but there's also different kinds of theories, whether or not, what existed at what time. There's arguments that dinosaurs didn't exist as long ago as we think, because of the sedimentary tissue that they've been testing.
What are you referring to? Are you referring to the soft tissue?
Soft tissue, dinosaur bones in general, because of the sedimentary, layering that they have on them. You could potentially be testing that instead of the actual tissue or the bone marrow density and all that stuff.
I'm not sure what you're referring to with that. What specific thing? Do you think we're dating the dinosaurs wrong?
It could be that we could be, yeah.
Okay, how are we dating them wrong?
Well, from carbon dating,
We don't use carbon dating.
Or whatever dating that, what do they use?
They use, for example, uranium lead dating is what's used for the dinosaur
Okay.
bone that I showed you earlier.
Do you believe, do you think personally, just asking you, do you believe that it could be misconstrued from the dating of maybe the minerals and the things like phosphorus and minerals from the earth that encompass their bones, that whenever we test them, it can be kind of misconstrued for the minerals and all that?
No, and the reason why I think that it is not misconstrued is because specifically when we do uranium lead dating, what we're dating is the zircon crystals that exist at the same sedimentary layers as these bones. And the way that we know that zircon is a good method of doing this dating process is because its crystalline structure doesn't allow for lead when the zircon crystal first forms. It does allow for lead that comes from the decay of uranium, but no lead when it first forms. So from the moment it formed, there is no lead. Every single piece of lead came from uranium, which formed in the crystal that then decayed into lead. So you can compare the ratio of uranium atoms to the ratio of lead atoms, and then determine based on the half-life exactly how old that crystal is.
Okay. Well, thank you for the conversation.
Hey, thanks so much for coming on up.
I appreciate your view on, and I'll be thinking about that for
Yeah.
sure.
Thank you so much for coming on up. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, doing all that good stuff. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you are 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran as we go to the very next guest. Hey, how's it
Hey, Ian.
going?
Oh, how are you?
Doing well. How old are you?
I'm 18 years old.
Yep. And what religion?
So, first of all, I'm an Orthodox Christian. I mean, I used to be atheist for over 13 years of my life,
Hmm.
or like almost high school. First of all, I respect everyone here in the chat and whatever they believe in. That's the most important thing that every single religious and every single person should do in this world.
Hmm.
So, as we can begin, I can either answer your questions that you have, why there's God, or why did I choose like Jesus Christ.
Either
me.
one, whichever one you feel more strongly about like either
Whichever
like the
one you
Christian
prefer,
God
like-
exists or just God exists. Either one's fine.
So I can begin with general. Do you believe that Jesus is a fictional character, or he was existing at least like a human person?
I think that he's a person that existed. I don't think that he rose from the dead. I don't think that he did anything
Yeah,
supernatural. I don't think that there's good evidence.
Of course.
For those sorts of
you're
claims.
going to believe that he was. Sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting.
You're
It's
good.
okay. You believe that Jesus Christ was crucified and lived as a person, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very good claim, honestly. It's like because many people believe otherwise, but of course. So why for me he was resurrected? I mean, I don't have to explain why he existed because you already know the fact and what happened 2026 years ago and so on, that the history even knows that he was resurrected. So first of all, as we know, the historical evidence points to the tomb being open, correct?
I don't
That's
think we
first.
have any historical evidence about where his tomb is.
I mostly refer it outside the biblical source that the many writers like Pliny, Pliny and Josephus wrote a lot of Thanatos tomb open.
Is
and
that
about
Pliny the
Christ.
Elder?
Pliny in the 1st century and Josephus.
I don't think Josephus made any claims about having an open tomb.
I think in my opinion, I remember him claiming that about Christ's resurrection, but anyways, the empty tomb points that.
Oh wait, sir.
The 12 martyrs-
Before
Oh,
we move
sorry,
on, let's get clear on Josephus and Pliny.
Yeah.
I don't grant that Josephus says anything about like an open tomb. I can read the passage from
Yeah,
Josephus
okay.
to you if you'd like. But let me. Where is
Yeah, take your time. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
okay. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, for he was a doer of startling deeds, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure, and he gained a following both among many Jews and many of Greek origin. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at that day did not forsake him, and the tribe of Christians so named from him are not extinct at this day. So it says like Jesus existed, he had a following,
Okay, yeah.
but it makes
And
no
he did
mention
his
of like an
teachings.
open tomb or anything of that sort.
Okay, so the reason why I believe in resurrection, it points out to the martyrs who decided to die for the claim. For example, all of the 12 disciples who saw that claim, they died for it. They got crucified. Some, like, for example, Peter was crucified upside down, which is a confirmed historical fact. Many others like died for it in different ways. Because like the martyrs just proves that nobody dies for a lie. Which is my claim, because many people were dead. Instead of claiming that Caesar is king, they died for the claim of Christ being resurrected.
Yeah, let me ask you a question about like people never
Yeah.
dying for a lie. So in the year 2000, there's a Hindu priest named Shanti Kali who he was murdered by Christians. You know, he had seen visions of the Hindu gods, and he professed the existence of the Hindu gods, and he led like a group of people. And one day he was confronted by Christian terrorists who said, "We're going to kill you unless you convert to Christianity." And he said, "No, I'm not willing to convert to Christianity. I know that Hinduism is correct. I've seen the Hindu gods." Would you say that Shanti Kali died for a lie?
It's a very good argument. I really like it, but also I think it makes more sense that all of the 12 people have chosen the same faith rather than only one person. You know what I mean? My
But do
point
you
is
think he
like,
died for a lie?
I think absolutely is more probability that he died for a lie than all of the disciples dying for a lie. You know what is my point basically?
Okay, so you do think that people could conceivably die for a lie?
Of course, yeah, of course,
Okay,
absolutely.
sure.
But I think because all of the 12 disciples make it look far more obvious that it was not just a lie; it was a supernatural claim.
Yeah, sure. So I guess like here's kind of the flip side, which is that I don't think that we have any evidence that a single one of the disciples died professing the resurrection.
So I also have. I think you recognize what is the Shroud of Turin.
Oh,
Yeah?
wait, sorry. Before we move past that,
Of
so
course,
like
yeah,
the
sorry.
the place that we're currently at in the argument, you said people won't die for a lie, and the way we're evaluating, like in your view, like Hinduism versus Christianity is like we're counting up the number of people that died for a lie. Unless you have evidence that these people died professing the resurrection, that would actually mean that your standard of people would never die for a lie would actually lead you to being Hindu. So, do you have any evidence that any of the disciples died professing the resurrection? Otherwise, I mean, like, how do you avoid the conclusion that Hinduism is true under your very own standard of evidence?
I mean, it also points to mostly sense because I don't think they will just be crucified out of nowhere just for believing or stating. They probably should have believed in the supernatural powers of Christ to be crucified.
Why?
Because if no similar things have occurred, you know what's my point? I don't think they would have been dead from any other cause if it's only the disciples who were mostly crucified this way and other people who claimed his resurrection.
So, I mean, Rome crucified 2 million people. They crucified people genuinely all of the time, constantly. They crucified so many people.
But it was before Christ, correct?
I mean, all throughout. They crucified people before Christ, after Christ, but the total number of people that they crucified is like millions. I also have no reason to even think that I only have reason to think that one of the disciples was even martyred, and I have no reason to think that that one disciple was martyred for the resurrection. So, I mean, what would be the evidence that all 12 of them were killed at all?
But the killing of those is confirmed in history. Everybody knows that they were dead.
So I know, like, you said it's confirmed in history, everybody knows it, but do you have, like, a specific source? Because I don't think saying, like, everybody knows it is good evidence.
It's not good. Okay, fine.
I need,
If
like, a
it's not good
specific
evidence,
source, right?
Yeah, I understand the point, yeah. But okay, I will try to research, but I can give you another reason than why I believe also there's something supernatural.
Wait, before we move off of that,
okay
I'm totally going to allow you to move off of that one, but I do want to point out that as things currently stand, you know, there's only one person who, you know, we know for sure died for their religion, professing a religious experience, and it's like the Hindu person.
Okay.
So under your standard of evidence, this should lead me to Hinduism. But
what do you mean by that? If it's possible to evaluate, because like I'm a little bit confused on that question.
So, okay. So the way that we determine who's telling the truth. So you're saying that Shantikali in Hinduism, like even though Shantikali would have died for a lie, in Hinduism, okay. So you said that the apostles, it's more likely that they were telling the truth, that they wouldn't die for a lie because 12 of them died. But after discussing it, you can't establish that a single one of them died for the resurrection. So it seems like if we're evaluating under the standard of nobody would die for a lie, the only person who would potentially be dying for a lie, as the evidence stands, is Shantikali, which should lead us to a belief in Hinduism. If we take like people would never die for a lie as like a good standard of evidence.
I understand your point, but it mostly also points to logic in that time, because as we know, if Jesus will be a big liar, Christianity will never have spread from a lie during that times, because, you know, lying at that time, and since women were considered the first eyewitnesses of Jesus rising, I'm going to refer a little bit also in the biblical now, not only outside the Bible, of course, a little bit from the Bible where women were considered the first eyewitnesses. I think becoming just a lie is just something that would never allow Christianity to spread, because Jesus, his actions, his teachings showed otherwise. Because if he would be a complete liar, I don't think Christianity will spread, and Jesus will never be able to, like, but like his actions and teachings that he has done as a person, because he was existing and he did teachings.
But what are the teachings? What's the content of the teachings, and how do we know that that is the content of the teachings?
That's why the Bible existed, because people who were there during the Jesus of teachings wrote it. Of course, there also Josephus, I think, wrote about Christ, if I'm sure, but if you can correct me.
I mean, like what I read to you earlier from Josephus is the entirety of what he says about Jesus. He says nothing further than that.
I remember that I've heard that he also said that he did a miracle when he resurrected, but some people say that it was humanly forged. If you
Yeah.
can correct me if it's possible.
Yeah, that's like my understanding is that that's the most commonly held belief, is that when other people ascribe positions to Josephus at the time, they're stating explicitly that he did not think that Jesus was the Messiah. Also, I mean, if Josephus thought Jesus was the Messiah, then it makes no sense that he would be Christian instead of Jewish.
Okay. I think during that time, I consider Jesus was Hebrew, not Jewish, because I think there's a big difference between Jew and Hebrew.
I mean, sure, we can make like whatever distinction you'd like, but presumably Josephus would be Christian.
No, Joseph, I think he was Hebrew or Jew, one of the two.
Yeah.
But for sure he was not. I don't think he was a Christian. He was a Jew or Hebrew writer
Sure.
in the first centuries, during the Jesus existence, but neither it's possible to disprove whether it wasn't humanly forged, whether what he wrote was true or not.
Well, we can like evaluate it by asking like, well, which one best explains the evidence that's in front of us? Why would he be Jewish or Hebrew instead of Christian if he believed that Jesus rose from the dead?
Because during that time, or maybe how was his status before his soul? Maybe that's how was his book. Because originally, maybe, or thought in his book, he stated that he was a Jew writer. That's why I'm saying.
Could you run that one by me one more time? I don't think I got that.
Well, before, for example, the resurrection has happened, although he claimed to be Hebrew, that's why he was considered Hebrew or Jew. You know what's my point?
I don't understand what you're saying.
Maybe he didn't state that he became a Christian afterwards. Maybe he stated before the resurrection as a writer, I'm a writer, that he is a Jew. And
But he was Jewish his entire life, though.
He wrote it, yeah.
I'm not sure what sources that we have for his life. I mean, it would make sense if he wrote it. It would also make sense if like other historians wrote it.
It's going to be difficult to gather all the information from the ancient times. It's not the easiest thing, I'm sure. So,
but yeah, I mean, my understanding is that like the historian consensus is that he was Jewish his entire life, that he was never Christian. So that doesn't really seem to make sense if he thought Jesus was the Messiah, as is professed in the supposed like forgery.
Okay, but that's how I said, I don't think Christianity, in my opinion, would spread rapidly right after his death if it was all a lie.
Why not? Lots of
Because,
religions spread rapidly.
What?
Lots of religions spread rapidly, like Mormonism spread rapidly, Islam spread rapidly.
About Islam, that most of these religions just fell off like crazy. It's only local now, except Islam, which all had confirmed of 0 eyewitnesses.
Okay, I mean, I don't think that there are any eyewitnesses in your book either, though.
I mean, what do you mean?
Like, I don't grant that any part of the Bible was written by like an eyewitness to Jesus's life.
But everybody who wrote were prophets in Christianity and saw Jesus' lives. And there were also confirmed people who lived with Jesus. Paul, Peter.
Paul didn't live with Jesus.
Paul is a prophet who was also writing about how many eyewitnesses were there during the crucifixion in the Bible.
but Paul is not like an eyewitness. He doesn't he never met Jesus.
He was a part of an eyewitness. He was part of an eyewitness, which he stated there were 500 eyewitnesses.
But he doesn't name any of them. That's just a claim. We have no reason to think that there actually was this 500 group of eyewitnesses.
Yeah, it's a biblical source. I'm not saying it's claimed anything else rather than the Bible, but you're just asking me how many people have met and were with Jesus. For example, the brother of Christ, James, was with Jesus. He's also part of Christianity. The apostles also saw Jesus. They lived with him.
Yeah, but I don't have any reason to think that we know what their testimony is. For example, it says explicitly that people like John were illiterate. Okay. So it doesn't seem like John could be the author of the book of John.
But according to who was he illiterate?
According to the book of Acts.
It has, okay. Is it possible to read me the verse if it's...
Yeah.
Because, of course, I don't know the whole Bible, so that's what I'm saying, because it's 28,000 verses, which is going to be like...
This is Acts 4:13.
Mm-hmm.
Now, seeing the constancy of Peter and John, understanding that they were illiterate and ignorant men, they wondered and they knew that they had been with Jesus.
Yeah, although he was illiterate, although he would speak for others when others would write for him, I think it's kind of logical they wrote it out in his name.
So you don't think that John is the actual author of John? You think that it was like transcribed?
I think other apostles wrote it for him in representing his name, because he was able to speak, I think, like whatever he saw about Jesus, right? Because he was illiterate, he couldn't write, so somebody wrote it for him.
Sure.
It goes the same for Islam, because Muhammad was also illiterate, which others also wrote the Quran. That's correct.
My understanding is that the Quran is not written by Muhammad, but also that he's not illiterate. There are like hadiths that claim that he is able to write. But I mean, regardless, like, what's the evidence that the book of John was even verbally given by John?
Of course, it's very difficult to correct evidence, but neither there's evidence to disprove that. You know what's my point? Of course, there's no evidence to confirm, but at the same time, there is no evidence. But just
then why not be agnostic as opposed to taking like a stance on it?
Well, I'm sorry, I misheard it. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Why wouldn't you just be like agnostic as to the author of John?
What do you mean by that? Me agnostic?
Yeah, just like say, like, with respect to like who wrote John, that you're not sure who wrote John, as opposed to saying, well, John wrote John, but he like transcribed it through another person.
I think if you're not sure that John wrote it, I don't think it should make you automatically agnostic, of course. It's like the same argument as I said, if I'm not sure if there was one eyewitness who wasn't there, I'll be agnostic. I don't think it goes like this.
Okay, because but you're not agnostic to who wrote the book of John. You think that John wrote John.
No, I did not say that. But
wait.
Before, yeah, because
okay,
I
sure.
didn't know the whole Bible. Now I agree with your statement because I believe in the Bible and you're right. John was illiterate. I can agree to you. Yeah, I was wrong before.
That's okay.
So,
sure. You want to talk about the Shroud of Turin?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
that's okay.
It's possible to continue. If you don't want to continue, you can continue.
No, it's totally fine. I'm enjoying the conversation. So,
I'm respectful. I'm respectful to everyone in the chat. As long as they respect me, I'm also respect them. So,
no, I mean, I appreciate that about you. So, with respect to the Shroud of Turin, the reason that I think the most damning piece of evidence is that there's just a convergence around a specific set of years in like the 1300s.
13th century, yeah.
Yeah. The very first report of this thing even existing at all in the first place comes from the 13th century, or it would be the 14th century, I think. It comes from the 1300s. It's a bishop in France saying, there's this forgery going around. I've spoken to the artist. I know that it's a forgery. And so that's like a good reason to think that this is a forgery from the 1300s. The very first mention of it ever in all of history is it being called a forgery from the time that it's believed to be a forgery. And then, we radiometrically date it, and it dates back to that exact date range. There's just like a convergence to the 1300s for the Shroud of Turin.
So, as I said, of course it's a very good post statement that you think it's a forgery, but I think the reason it couldn't even be possibly forged, the way that science even has explained and couldn't even disprove the shroud, because the Shroud of Turin had no ink, no paint, correct?
Oh no, it did have paint. It had red ochre.
It didn't.
It does. I can give you a study.
Even science explained it. That's
okay, so the study that claims that it
did not exist, yeah.
So the study that claims that it has red ochre on it, it's called the Shroud of Turin, Blood or Artist's Pigment, and it finds that indeed it does have red ochre on it.
Yes, but the traditional ink pen never existed, and also science has explained that for this to be produced, it needed 34 billion kilowatts of energy.
No, you just need to paint it on.
Science explained that it needed a chemical reaction or heat to happen over 34 billion of kilowatts of energy. Which points? I'm sorry, yeah.
Are you reading off of like a study?
No, I'm not. I'm on TikTok, or if I
no. Like I want to know what study you're reading off of. Like why? Because my understanding is that they found like paint on it So, I like if you're saying that there would need to be like some massive release of energy, I'd love to know what study that is,
Yeah,
and
but
then I
first of
can.
all, also,
Yeah.
yeah, tell me, sorry.
No, go for it.
Like, there was no ink or paint before discovered, and it's only one ever exists in that type of shards. And the way, also, during that time in the shroud, there were also blood and wounds discovered on that picture without any additional ink or paint. So
Well,
it
wait, but there
shows
is.
that it
I've
could
given
have
you a study
sorry.
that disproves that, right? Like, okay, what's happened here is that I've given you like a study that states explicitly that what's on the shroud is paint. We can't move past that unless you have like some rebuttal to that. I mean, you can't just say that it's not paint. I've given you a study that says that it is.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but we also have it in history books in school, which also we had a shot of Turin. One that said it cannot be produced by ink. It had no ink, no paint, zero chance, nothing.
Oh, but what would you make of the fact that you can literally go on the internet and buy a Shroud of Turin right now?
What do you mean by that? By the shot of Turin right now?
You could
You
buy.
can buy the you can forge it right now, but currently
Yeah,
at that time you couldn't forge it.
This would be with like ink, right? You know, they.
Yeah, I can also make right now with ink, but before ink and paint didn't exist. That's why it couldn't be humanly forged and painted with that.
Wait, why
Because for
not?
it to be because ink and paint didn't exist.
But you don't think paint existed in like the 1300s?
This type of ink was not existed because it needed chemical reaction or heating.
You don't think
For
red
it to
ochre
happen.
existed in the 1300s? That's like
What?
literally when you take like clay and mix it with water.
But even science has explained there was no ink or paint.
Which science?
What do you mean? If science explained that it needed
Can I
34
can I
billion
get the name
kilograms
of a study
energy.
that says that there's no paint or ink?
I mean, I need some time again to go
That's
back
okay.
to this. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm not willing to grant that claim, and I'm giving you explicit evidence against that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it's supposed to be. It's a respectful conversation. I respect that.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel the same
so-
way. Yeah.
So, that's why, because I remember I was founding a study which pointed to that. This is it. When I saw that you need 34 kilos of energy, that means it was 0% to be humanly forged. We need something supernatural to happen since Jesus claimed to be light and something.
Sure.
Because
I guess I
he-
just have no idea
yeah,
what
sorry.
study that refers to.
I'm talking about in the Bible, Jesus has claimed to be a source of lighting.
No,
That's
but
correct.
what's the? I would need like some sort of source that makes the claim that in order to make this image, there would need to be a massive release of light.
Because that's what that's how the shroud was formed, with a lot of chemical energy and heating.
Says who?
The stars that have been there.
Okay. I mean, unless you have the name of a study, I think we should probably move to a different point because I'm not willing to grant that. And I'm giving you like explicit studies to the contrary. So unless you have like some study that says that it must have been formed with light, I just think that there's like no way to make progress on this front.
It's possible to ask also, where do you get your studies? I really want to know, just like.
Sure, yeah. This study, I cited it earlier. Where is it? Where'd it go? The study's name is The Shroud of Turin, Blood or Artist's Pigment. It comes from the Macron Research Institute.
I mean, to what extent do you believe that only this is right? Like, that's my question.
I believe it to the extent that I've seen no studies to the contrary.
Okay, yeah. I understand your point.
If you gave me studies to the contrary, right? Like if the Shroud of Turin couldn't be explained, then I'd probably update my beliefs to maybe be in line. You know, I'd probably update the beliefs and maybe even think that Christianity is more plausible.
All right, if you want, we can move to the point where we continue, but I think I will need time to again find because, like,
That's okay.
I don't even know. I
Yep.
can now go mostly to the general rather than just explicitly Jesus. You know what I mean?
Sure, that's fine. Is there like some sort of additional point that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, for me, for example, whatever has a beginning has a cause, right?
Sure. I'm willing
Has
to
a
grant
cause
that.
to exist. Yeah, whatever has a beginning has a cause to exist. And this cause is beyond any physics and which points to an intelligent mind.
Sure. Why would I think that the universe began?
Because it has a beginning.
Why?
The universe is not eternal.
Why not?
Because there's no scientific fact saying that the universe is eternal.
There are no scientific facts saying that the universe is not eternal either.
But neither it is eternal.
You're making the claim that it has a beginning. It would then be your burden to demonstrate that.
Yes, the Big Bang has created yeah.
So, according to a recent survey of physicists, the majority opinion among cosmologists, this is 68% of cosmologists, believe that the Big Bang is a theory that states that the universe evolved from a hot, dense state that says nothing about whether there was an absolute beginning of time or not. So, according to the majority of cosmologists, they don't believe that the Big Bang is the beginning. It makes no claims to be the beginning. It just says that the universe was in a hot, dense state and then it rapidly expanded.
But as I said, I don't think anything can come from nothing. That's what I'm saying. That's my point. It's just impossible to explain that nothing can come from nothing. Like,
why would I think that it ever came into existence, though?
But how does it come from existence without nothing?
Do you think that God came from something?
No, he's eternal. He cannot be created.
Sure. So why couldn't the universe be eternal?
Because it doesn't just come from nothing. It doesn't even.
Are you saying that if something's eternal, then it comes from nothing?
No. If something is eternal, it cannot be created. It's outside time, outside science, outside physics.
So
the universe can be explained.
If something is eternal, though, is it then true that it comes from nothing?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
If something is eternal, would it then follow from that it comes from nothing? Like, would it be true to say of something eternal that it comes from nothing?
That's a good point, but what do you think? It should point you to something. Why do you think that the universe is eternal?
Sure, I can give you arguments in favor of that. So, change.
It's all about the reviews from the cosmologists, what you said.
Oh, I can give you like a philosophical argument for like the necessity of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, change must have always existed. Change can't come into existence because if change came into existence, then prior to change existing, there would be a state with no change, and then a change would occur within this state with no change, and it would become a state with change. But that's a contradiction to have a change occur in a changeless state, which means that there could never be a changeless state. Change must have always existed. But if change exists, then time exists, because every change is an event, and events require time. So if change exists, then time exists. Change always existed, so time must have always existed.
That's how I said, because what has God done, it cannot be explained by anything, because it is outside time, outside science, because God is something unexplainable. It is something, it's a mind, it's something caused beyond everything. So that's why I'm saying.
Maybe you could help me out with this. I don't think that was like quite responsive to the argument, but maybe it would be easier if I just put the argument on screen and then we can make it like super clear. So, change always existed. If change exists, then time exists. Therefore, time always existed. If time always existed, then God did not create it. If God exists, then he is the creator of time. Therefore, God does not exist.
Okay, do you want me 1 minute to like understand your argument if it's possible?
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, take your time.
So I have a question. What does make you think that if change exists, time exists? Why can't this change be made outside of the time with God's creation? Just like
because every change is an event, and events exist in time. So an event is just something that happens, and every change is a thing that happens. So that means that every change is an event, so every change must be in time.
Yeah, but any event can occur outside time with G because G is an intelligent mind.
I don't know what it means for an event to occur outside of time. I think that one of the necessary features of an event is that it's within time. I think events are like strictly temporal.
But why cannot event exist outside of the time?
Because events exist within sequences, and time is the sequence of events.
I mean, like, I don't really get your point, because it's, to be fair, like, with respect.
That's fine, but okay, is there like a premise here that you disagree with?
I mean, I will mostly disagree with the second one, like, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay,
I'm an honest
maybe I can give
person.
you. I mean, if change exists, then you have befores and afters. But to have befores and afters, you need a past, present, and future. But if you have a past, present, and future, then you have time. So if you have change, then you have time.
Okay, yeah.
That's the second premise. If change exists, then time exists.
Yeah, but what, as I said, that's the reason it makes you think that time always existed, yeah? Because of the past, future, and present, yeah?
Yep.
But what if this existing time can be created by someone in individual mind?
Wait, sorry, say that again?
Why do you think that time was still not created? Well, you already answered that question, yeah? Or is it like the
Yep,
same
well,
question?
it's literally like on the screen in front of you why I think that time
But
isn't
like, what does
created.
make you think that the eternal time, why do you think that the time is eternal? Still don't, I want you to reevaluate it, because it's confusing me. Why do you think time is eternal?
Because
God cannot create time.
because change is eternal, and change necessitates time, so time is eternal.
So you don't believe like nothing that change can be occurred by God in time when time is not eternal? Why cannot God create time, and within this time changes can happen?
Yeah,
I think it's
sure.
more
So
obvious.
let's suppose that there's a first change. We're going to have a changeless state, and then we're going to have a state wherein we have the first change. Well, we would have
Okay.
this changeless state, and it would change into a state where the first change occurs. But then we would have a change before the first change, because there would be a change to go from this state to the other state, and we would have a change in a changeless state. And that's a contradiction, so we can't have that.
Is it possible to make an example, for example, or rather understand it like with an example, for example, like create me with anything, rather than just saying change, because it will go too many changes.
Maybe I could like draw like a picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I would rather prefer that, yeah.
Yeah.
So I can fully
Okay.
understand
So
your
we have
main point. Yeah.
let me pull up my notes and my little whiteboard. Okay. Let me. Whoa, this should be like way bigger. Okay, whatever. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's say, I don't know how well this is going to work, but let's suppose that change began to exist. At first, there would be, this state over here with no change. There's no change in this state over here, and then it changes into the state where change exists. So we would have, in the beginning, before the first change, we have no change, and then a change occurs in the state with no change, and we arrive at change. But that's a change prior to the first change, so that's a big problem.
I think it's better like to begin just right. For example, in the beginning you have God, correct? That's how we believe. We have God, which is He's eternal and always existed. Of course, the changes didn't happen during that time, you're correct. But just right as a God, He existed. He has always existed, He's eternal.
And then what?
But then it led to a change. Yeah?
So you're saying
This
okay, so change didn't occur, and then a change occurred.
No, there's no change. No change. No, there was no. So, there's the eternal being, yeah? Jesus Christ, or God, anyone. Which He didn't make any change. He made a change because God cannot be explained. He has power. I don't understand why do you try to reject it. I don't understand why it's so rejectable, because I don't see it as a contradiction.
Do you think it's a contradiction for a change to occur in a changeless state?
With God's powers and God's will, everything is possible.
But you don't think that that's a contradiction to say there's a changeless state and a change occurred in the changeless state?
Wait, you repeat that again?
Do you think change occurred in a changeless state is a contradiction?
Yes, but this changeless state comes with an intelligent mind which cannot be explained by a human mind and neither science.
Do you think God has the power to do contradictions?
What do you mean God has power? God is all powerful. I don't think he does mistakes. He's sinless. He cannot make mistakes.
Sure, no, but I'm speaking of like contradictions. Does God have the power to do contradictions?
God has never done a contradiction.
Well, a change occurring in a changeless state would be a contradiction.
I mean, if it's possible to explain me why is that so I can understand you more.
Because in this state, change would both not exist and exist.
But I can make it example. For example, if the environment is not changing and it's changeless and it does make a change, which also makes a contradiction in general, which is like
What?
a very...
The environment
it's
does
a
change.
Yeah, but if the environment, for example, does not change and changes naturally, if it stays right now, it doesn't change, and the next day it changes. That means it's a contradiction
Yeah,
too.
it's because something outside of it comes along and changes it.
So it basically points to intelligent mind. If you say that
The other
something outside
thing,
makes it change.
the other thing was already changing. Like if there's a truly changeless state of reality, whatever's changing it would itself need to change. So for example, if you have like, I don't know, like a table and nothing changes, and then one day the hurricane comes along and tears the table to splinters, you know, the hurricane was
So that's
changing,
exactly
which
my point.
allowed for the change to
something
occur within the
changeless
table.
Can have a change. So that's what you just said, the changeless. The
Yeah, the
table
other the thing that
had a
changes
change,
it would
which is
itself
not a
need to be
contradiction.
changing.
But that's exactly your point that you've stated.
It would be a changing table at the point when the thing that's already changing comes along. Also, it's true in the state of reality that change exists. When the table example.
So it basically points that your God exists too.
No,
Is
the
your
opposite.
argument.
It points to him not existing. I can pull the syllogism back up and you can tell me like
you
the premise
see,
of this
there's
that
a
you disagree with.
But they say that there's a changeless, which say it needs a change to change, which leads to an intelligent mind that is changed. That's my point.
So you hold to the view that a changeless state, a change occurred in a changeless state.
That's exactly what you just said. If the table is changeless,
It wasn't a
and it didn't
changeless
change,
state. There was change elsewhere.
It needed a state to change to try
It
to
wasn't
change
a
direction or fly
changeless
away.
state. This isn't analogous.
What do you mean by that? Define
It
intelligence.
was not. There was change that existed in reality in the table example.
Yes, but why can you not imply it to God trying also to change?
Does God
the
change?
environment? God himself doesn't change, but he can change in the environment and the creation that he's done.
Okay,
He
that would
himself
seem to
cannot
be
change because he's eternal.
okay. So let's evaluate the claim: a change occurred in a changeless state.
Okay.
So in this state, it's both true that, you know, changeless state implies change does not exist. A change occurs implies change does exist.
Okay.
This is a contradiction.
Wait.
Change does not exist and change does exist is a contradiction. It can't both exist and
I
not
think the first one
exist.
could be wrong because if there's first of all, if there's a changeless state, how do you know that there is no any source that can make it change? You cannot
Because a
prove
change
or
cannot
near this-
occur in a changeless state. There's a contradiction.
How do you know if it's a changeless state?
Because if change comes into existence prior to that, change doesn't exist. That would be changeless.
But what makes you think that? My question is not
Changeless
answered.
just means like change doesn't exist.
But what does it make it not exist?
Sorry, what's the question?
How do you know? How do you know that the creation was changeless?
Because if God causes the first change, then there's some state of affairs where change doesn't exist.
No, God caused the creation of it.
Yes.
That's how it was formed manually,
And in
naturally.
God's timeless eternity without change, did change exist?
Change did exist. When
Change
he,
existed
he
in his
applied it.
timeless eternity without change.
Yeah, because his eternity
That's a
and
contradiction.
divinity cannot be explained.
This is
not
why
a
I can't be a Christian. I just don't think contradictions could be true.
I mean, not only Christian. You mean religious? Yeah.
Well, I don't think that. I think this is like a big hang up is that if your worldview relies on like affirming contradictions, well, I'm just not going to do that.
I understand you, but I still don't understand why as much as I say, you're trying your best to try to disprove the thinking that there's a superactual individual mind which can make a change because it cannot be explained in the powers.
That would be a
It's God.
contradiction to have a first change. Because if there's a first change, if change comes into existence, then there's some existence without change that changes into an existence with change.
Okay, what if God implied it to make it changeable?
What if he what?
What if God has implied it when creation to make it changeable?
If he implied it. Is that the question?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means if God implied
then
it.
it doesn't make it changeless. If God has implied it to make it changeable.
I don't know what it means for God to imply it to be changing.
Make it.
Sure, God makes it. Sure, okay. Was God always making it change or changing, or did he begin to make it change?
Okay, let's say always, okay?
Sure, then change just would have always existed. Oops, sorry, fuck.
It's okay, that's all right, yeah.
Yeah. Little switcheroo happened. Sure.
But I don't think if change exists, it doesn't disprove God's existence.
Sure, but if change always existed, then time would have always existed.
Yes, but when he started making the creation, it was all outside of the time. Most of the time, it would always exist. Maybe it did exist. We don't know. We cannot confirm it. But Jesus can make things outside time and inside the time.
So then you would say that change always existed.
We can say that the change maybe would always exist. Maybe it didn't start existing, but Jesus has implied it to start existing.
Okay.
Or God.
Or wait.
In general. I'll refer to general because not only religion.
But God had always created it. If God creates something, then that thing exists. So God creates change.
It has a beginning. It has a beginning.
So you're saying God always created change, but change does not always exist.
No, God created a beginning, and this beginning went to the change.
He creates a beginning? A beginning would require like a specific point in time, so you would have time before time.
Yeah, because
you'd have a beginning of time within time.
Yeah, God cannot be explained internally.
So you would say you do believe that there was a beginning of time that was itself within time.
Yes, whatever comes
that would require
to
time to exist before time exists.
What do you mean by that? Sorry?
You're saying that time had a beginning at a specific time. Mm-hmm. So time existed before time existed.
When God created the cause and that exacting to begin, it had a cause. This cause came from individual mind, intellectual mind.
I suppose
everything had a beginning.
If the cost of your worldview is believing that time existed before time existed, I'm not going to believe that. That's another contradiction.
Well, why don't you believe that something caused to exist by an intellectual individual mind? There's no contradiction. It's clearly
I just told you. I've told you like multiple contradictions. The contradiction that I just told you that I don't feel like you've really addressed is that there would be time before time if time begins within time.
I never said that time begins within time. There's a difference.
So time doesn't begin at a specific time? Then how does God will it at a specific time?
Because God is outside time and outside anything.
Sure.
That can be logically explained.
If he wills time to come into existence at a specific time, then time begins within time. So there would be time before time.
Yeah, maybe time begins with God's decision.
Okay. So did God always make that decision? Or does he begin to make that decision at some point?
Maybe his decision was eternal and it was applied during that specific time, as we can define it.
So time before time again.
Why do you think it's time before time?
Because you're saying that God created time at a specific time. He had eternally willed for time to come into existence at a specific time. So time is coming into existence within
Yeah,
time.
but time is not eternal like Jesus. Jesus is eternal.
But you're
It is
saying
not the
that,
same.
well, wait, sorry. I didn't say in this instance that time is eternal. What I'm saying is that there's a contradiction in time coming into existence at a specific time.
And why is that?
Because you would have
I
time
don't
within
understand.
time before time.
That thing came on the time where Jesus was willing to do that. Well, it's not a contradiction. It's a normal.
Yeah, you
thing
said it
that can
again.
happen if you have faith.
It happened at the time when he wanted
When
time to
Jesus
come into
specifically wanted.
existence. That's time before
Okay.
time.
No, time was created by Christ, and during that time that was happened. That was not time before
During
time.
the
That was
what?
time during His creation. That's where the universe began. When He was
Okay.
beginning the universe, that's where it all began.
Sure. And if he's eternally willing it, then it must eternally exist. What you want to try to say is, well,
No,
he was
the universe
eternally
does not
willing that it
eternally
begins at
exist.
a specific time, but you can't say that he was willing that time begins at a specific time because then you have time before time exists.
What do you mean? That does not make my statement. It does not make that time exists before time. That's why time begins at a specific point. Doesn't mean that time
A specific
exists
point
before
of
time.
what?
Before what you just said, when something exists, it doesn't mean that before there was time too.
You said time begins at a specific point of what?
But when Jesus started creating the world,
Sure, but a point of what? What is it a point of?
What do you
Points
mean a point of
exist
what?
along like dimensions. What's the dimension that you're referring to?
it points to an
You said time begins at a specific point of what?
okay. Time. So reevaluate it if it's possible.
Hmm?
Can you repeat that? If it's okay?
Yeah,
My
of course. Yeah, no
done.
problem. So your claim is that time begins to exist at a specific point, but point of what?
Point of when Christ made the decision with his intellectual mind to create the universe and us.
But that's a time word. When is a time word? So when you say God created time at a specific point, you're saying he created it at a specific point in time.
He created it with his own will and decision, giving us free will, the creation of universe, which is when the all started at some
At a
point.
specific point in time, correct?
You can say maybe like this, but I don't think the way you understood it is right. But okay, we would say it like this.
Okay, well, that's a contradiction to have time come into existence at a specific point of time.
Why is that a contradiction?
Because you have time before time.
Yeah, but before that time of existence, there was nothing. Only God was eternal. That
Then how
doesn't
could
make
it
time
come
before
into
time.
existence at a specific point of time if time doesn't exist?
Yeah, because Jesus, when he was creating outside of the time, which led to that very beginning.
How can he be outside of time
had
if
a
time doesn't
beginning.
exist?
You're saying that I'm meaning that beginning was before the beginning. It doesn't work like that. Beginning never was before the
That's
beginning.
exactly what you're
Beginning
saying. You're
happened-
saying that time has a beginning at a specific point of time. So there would have
No,
been
the beginning
times,
has occurred when
and then
Jesus started
time
creating.
comes into existence at a time. So you have time, and then time comes into existence at a time. So that you have time
Okay,
before
although
time.
Maybe we're both misunderstanding each other, but I don't think the conversation is going anywhere because we've been like for 20 minutes.
Okay,
talking
listen,
like this
I'm just not going to
without-
believe that like a changeless state can
Yeah,
change.
Of course.
And
You have your own
yeah, it's fine.
belief.
Well,
You deserve
okay.
it, of course. Like,
Yeah, hey,
it's
well-
your free will.
Yep, I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Oh, wait, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, whatever.
happening?
But hey, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks so much for coming on up.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. It was an amazing conversation. I'll
Yep.
follow you back, don't worry.
Hey, yeah,
Sorry
appreciate
for
it.
not following you.
Oh, no, you're good. Oh, fuck, I probably cut him too soon. Lustra, thanks so much for the super chat. See you take an honest and robust interest in philosophy so early in life has inspired me to dive into these topics more deeply. I now understand more about my own belief system. Here's towards your next big read. Lustra, thank you so much. I appreciate the heck out of that, Lustra. Yeah, I think philosophy is great. I think that, I don't know, recently I've been thinking a lot about like Plato's cave. I think about the ways that I used to think about things, the ways I used to profess opinions on topics that I know nothing about. And I feel like, I don't know, it sounds like pretentious, but I feel like my thinking, like I really feel like the guy that's outside of the cave, or the guy, at least I feel, I don't know if I'm outside of the cave, but it at least feels like I'm not staring at shadows anymore. I'm capable of like thinking about topics on like a deeper level, because of my interest in philosophy. I think it's like a really worthwhile hobby. It's very hard to get into philosophy, admittedly, but I think that after you really grind through philosophy, it becomes super rewarding. Catholic Thinker, thanks so much for the super chat. If changes are events, then the 2-lane road becoming 3 lanes isn't an example of a change. That might be true. I at least think that the change that I'm referring to, maybe there are just 2 different senses of change, but the change that I'm referring to is like the change that corresponds to events, where if both properties were true simultaneously, there would be like a contradiction. So that could be, but I think I'm just talking about change in like a different sense. Pixel Booty, thanks so much for the super chat. None of the people claiming God's existence in chat can prove their claims on a call with Ian. That's true. All right. You know what time it is. Hey, what's up? How's it going?
It's going great. And yeah, just to clarify, the thing about the road change was less of a issue I had with the worldview and just more of like, hey, this seems to conflict with something you said earlier, and I was just curious on your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think there's probably 2 different senses of change going on here. I think the change that I'm interested in, well, first of all, I guess I'm not sure if it's like that crazy of a bullet bite to say, actually no, that isn't an example of change because it all happens on the same road.
Yeah.
But yeah, regardless, yeah, what do you got?
I was looking over the book you recommended, specifically the chapter on hell and the problem of evil, because I know that was something you had mentioned that you wanted to like an actual decent response to the eternal conscious torment view of hell.
Yeah, it seems like there's just like a slew of problems. Like it kind of seems like the view of justice that it commits you to needs to be like just a little bit crazy. Like you have to reject like very basic like intuitions about justice. Like, you know, for example, the punishment should be proportionate to the amount of harm caused.
So there, and this was partially what I wanted to, like what I was asking on, because I know you have a view on justice, and I'm partial to a view that Aquinas puts forth, where justice is less of giving someone what they deserve and more of putting back in order that which was put into disorder by the crime, so to speak.
Okay, so it's sure. So kind of like a restorative model of justice.
Yes.
Okay.
So like if I, as a 12-year-old boy, am playing baseball in the street and I break a window, whether I do labor for the neighbor that I broke the window for to provide, basically monetary compensation, like, hey, I will mow your yard for this amount of time, saving you enough money for you to, get the window back, or my father pays for the window back, like whatever the case may be, as long as the window is restored, justice has been achieved.
Okay.
So there's that aspect just to kind of keep in mind. But the biggest thing that I wanted to touch on was in the introduction, they list 5 elements that they believe every understanding of hell contains.
At least for eternal conscious torment, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the first one, I do agree with.
Let me pull it up. Blackwell, Companion to the Problem of Evil.
Yeah. First one I agree with, or at least, I do agree with, especially if we include demonic entities residing in hell.
I wonder if I can get this on screen.
Page 128
do another read
on
along.
the PDF.
Let me get this up and going.
If you type
Is it
128 on the PDF search page, it should come up.
shit? I'm trying to. Damn it. Let me get. Maybe this will do. Okay, wait. Yeah. Okay, sure. Sorry, I was getting it situated on YouTube. Okay, wait, but why is it fucked on Twitch? Oh no. It's not fucked on Twitch. It's fucked on Okay, we got it. We got it. Okay, cool. Sure. So page 127?
28.
Okay. Ooh.
Oh.
One sec. Okay. Yeah. I'm going by the ones that's at the top.
Oh.
Okay. Hell and the problem of evil.
Right at the introduction.
Okay.
So I agree with the first element.
So okay, some persons do or will reside in hell and will be there for an infinite period of time. Okay.
Yeah. I disagree with the second element. I'm going to go through which ones I agree with and then disagree, and then we can go into more detail. I disagree with the second element.
I don't think you want to do that. I understand the second element to just be saying like God sets the conditions.
So I disagree.
Okay.
And the Catholic Church, as I understand it, also disagrees, and I'll go into why that is.
Mm-hmm. I'm like mad curious who set up the hell system then.
So I disagree with 2, but I do acknowledge that 2 is a very popular, and one wouldn't necessarily be committing heresy in the Catholic view if they did affirm 2, but I don't think one is required to accept 2 in the Catholic worldview. And then let me see. I do agree with 3.
Yep. And that one's just the cumulative well-being. I'm sorry, I do this for the audience sake. 3 is the cumulative well-being, and well-being at any moment of any resident of hell is negative. It's just saying hell's bad. It sucks to be in hell.
I disagree with 4. And I'll explain a little bit more on that as well. But the summary of it is, as C.S. and I know a lot of people hate this, but like C.S. Lewis phrases it, I think, simply and beautifully: hell is locked from the inside. But I do disagree with 4 as well as 5, but I feel like 5 is a restatement of 2.
Okay, those in hell are consigned to hell as a punishment for either failing. Okay, you disagree with 5, but sure.
So, which one would you like me to dive into first?
Okay, so if you disagree with 4, then I might not necessarily disagree with the view, although it's not clear to me that your view would even fall under eternal conscious torment if you think people can leave hell by saying, well, I guess God exists, or whatever you think they need to do to satisfy it.
Yeah, so the way that the Catholic Church defines hell is willful separation and rejection of God and the communion and saints. And
maybe I'd hate to. One sec. Let me I wonder, is there any like statement from the Catholic Church about whether or not people can leave hell?
So to clarify, so the church has stated that people cannot leave hell, but the reason why I disagree with 4 is that they can't leave hell not because God is preventing them from leaving, like in a state where if they wanted to leave hell, then God prevents them from leaving hell. My position and my view is that they could leave hell if they wanted to, but they choose not to.
Okay, wait, so oh fuck, I completely, what the fuck page? Okay, sure, yeah, here. So
they're not blocked from leaving.
Okay, so you're saying that you're not saying that they can't leave, you're just saying that they won't leave.
Correct.
And that's true of everyone in hell?
So yeah, so the way, like, this is how I tried to describe it, because it definitely is very different from how a lot of people will present hell. I do admit that, but I think a lot of people misunderstand what hell is and oversimplify it. But let's say you have someone that is truly a non-resistant non-believer.
Yeah.
They die
Yep.
and they see God. They are now given everything that they need to become a believer, even though while on earth they were not an actual believer. This individual would,
Yeah, go for it.
this individual would then fall to their knees and say, I now see that you are the truth that I have been striving and looking for my whole life.
Sure.
That individual would not go to hell because they have accepted God.
Okay,
not
so you're
rejected him.
specifically saying that the only people that go to hell are those that like see God in the end and are like, I still don't want to be in a relationship with you?
Yes, that is the definition of what hell is. That's why God doesn't send anyone to hell. Now, the question then becomes, well, what if they change their mind? So you also have to understand that this is an atemporal state. So, people ask, well, what if Satan changed his mind, as an angel? Well, an angel is created with all of the knowledge that they ever would have, because they can't gain new knowledge. So when they make a choice, that choice comes with the knowledge of, oh, these are going to be the consequences of my actions. Like they already know all the consequences and how painful hell is, and like they already know all of that.
Well,
And so
because
I'm speaking specifically for Satan in this situation.
So one thing that I hear a lot of atheists, or I wouldn't say I hear a lot of atheists say this, but some atheists say, even if God was right there in front of me, I still wouldn't accept him.
Yeah.
But like, presumably, like, you're saying that it's an atemporal state. Presumably, if they were given the ability to change their mind, like a moment of like torture would probably make them change their mind.
So in that type of situation, I did kind of like if you really want to get a good idea on like how I view like the messiness of trying to describe it using temporal language when there's no time in this state. I think C.S. Lewis is The Great Divorce does a great job of like a poetic imagery of it. And I did appreciate his description of like the relationship of hell and purgatory. I disagree with a little bit of it, but there is a theological debate as to whether hell or purgatory is a part of hell or a part of heaven.
How could purgatory even exist if it's an atemporal state?
And that's something that I'm still struggling and working through. But what purgatory is meant to, because like the other aspect of it is like the other belief is, we will have a resurrected body, but there's also no space. So how is that going to work? So these, like, I'm going to be upfront, like those two questions, like how can this idea of like and maybe it's just like that second kind of change of like the road changing that we were talking about, but like I will admit that like it's not something I'm fully prepared to answer on at this point in time.
Okay, so let's say even that hell is blocked from the inside. Why then? Okay, wait. Also, in your rejection of 2, are you saying that God is not the person who sets the conditions for going to hell or not going to hell?
Correct. So the way that I like to describe it is in Catholic theology, you have something called the particular judgment, which is what happens immediately after a person dies. And the common description of it is God will sit there and judge everything that you've done, and you will see everything that you've done in the fullness of light. And while there is some benefit to that, I kind of, especially when I'm speaking with people where that concept is very alien to them, I like to describe it more as it's less of God judging us and more of the individual judging God and saying, either I will submit and follow you and be in a relationship with you, or saying, no, I refuse to submit, I refuse to bend the knee, you are nothing to me, and I refuse to follow you. So
Okay.
the individual is in a sense, is the one setting the conditions, not necessarily God.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that after we die, we choose whether we want to go to heaven or hell, and that happens like irregardless of what we did here on earth.
The basis of our choice is formed by our actions on earth, as in the sense of like, if you are an individual who is not oriented towards truth, you're not all of a sudden going to be an individual oriented towards truth after you die.
Sure, okay, yeah, that you're like whatever like virtues or vices you've developed, you're going to hold those dispositions. Although, like, I think that you say somebody's like a complete fucking weasel their entire life. You know, they weasel out of everything. They've developed a cowardly disposition. And then they get to judge God, and they know it's either torture forever or, you know, heaven, where they'll get to like ride like jet skis or whatever. Presumably this like weasel person would choose heaven because they don't want to get tortured.
So Bishop Barron and again C.S. Lewis both brought up a very interesting aspect. Bishop Barron got a lot of heat for it, and I do agree with him in something that he calls the hope for an empty hell. And in his video where he's talking about it, he makes a comment that like, because hell is about that relationship, so even though again like a lot of mystics and a lot of traditions will portray hell as a physical state of physical suffering, the Catechism states that that's not what the primary suffering is. If those do exist, they're secondary, but the primary source of the suffering is that internal separation from God. So the source of the suffering is more of an internal state as opposed to something being externally afflicted onto the individual.
Okay.
So for this weaselly person, even though they might say, yeah, I'll be with God, because that's not their internal disposition, they're still experiencing that suffering.
Would they be with God experiencing suffering? They'd be like in agony because they're like a coward fuck, and like God is, you know, perfectly courageous, and that's like really upsetting to them.
Bishop Barron theorizes that that's the quote unquote source of the suffering, that because they're that weaselly fuck, as you put it, and God is the embodiment of all that virtue, that pure goodness, instead of it being a source of joy for those who are oriented towards him, it's a source of pain for those who are not oriented to it.
So then in some sense it sounds like we all end up in the same place.
That's one interpretation of it, yeah. Like I'm still undecided as far as like the placement of it, but I do agree that like if heaven and hell are about, like, heaven is defined as beholding the beatific vision with the communion of saints.
Okay,
so
sure.
It's less of a description of a place and more of a description of one's orientation towards God, and hell is the reverse of that.
Okay,
so heaven and hell.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm like fucking like chomping at the bit. So it kind of seems like a problem at that point is that it doesn't seem true to say that some persons do or will reside in hell and will be there for an infinite period of time, because in this circumstance, there is no hell.
In the same way that there is a hell in the sense of not of, like, one can say, like, there is no physical location called despair, but someone can say he's in the pits of despair. So hell is that, like, it's a state of existence as opposed to a place of existence.
Okay, so I think I understand your view. Let me make sure I'm understanding it correctly, and then I can give like a couple of critiques of it. So basically what you're saying is that your view is that we're going to die, but then we'll be with God experiencing the beatific vision, wherein if we have like underdeveloped character, we're like the fact that our character is underdeveloped along like a number of dimensions is going to cause us like great suffering, or alternatively, if we developed a very virtuous character, then seeing the beatific vision is going to be something that's like extremely enjoyable for us. Is that like roughly accurate?
That's roughly accurate. The only thing that I would add is that purgatory is for those where it starts off painful, but because they did ultimately desire it, they're working towards it to a point where it becomes pleasurable, where it becomes a source of joy instead of pleasure, or instead of pain. And so what I often say is, like you were saying, hey, what about an individual who dies? They initially rejected God, but then they experience a torture, and then they're like, oh no, wait, I actually see the error of my ways. The way that I like to describe it is hell is reserved for those who, regardless of the amount of pain that they experience, they are convinced of the righteousness of their ways. Purgatory is those who needed a little bit of suffering to see, oh no, I see the error of my ways. Because very, 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 very few people go straight into heaven. Even most saints in Catholic theology are understood to have gone straight to heaven. Like very few people. Almost everyone goes through purgatory in some capacity. The question is, how long is that individual in purgatory?
Okay.
Now, exactly how all of that works and everything else, like that's a little bit more in depth than I'm comfortable going into. But as far as like the eternal consciousness of hell, those in hell are, yes, experiencing immense pain and suffering, but it's not because God is externally forcing it onto them.
Yeah.
It's because they saw it, they knew the consequences of their choice at this moment, like after they've passed away, and they chose it anyway, and nothing would ever convince them to move away from that choice.
Okay. So one question that's like I guess obvious is like, why is this more just than like annihilationism for the souls that have zero interest?
So this gets into that eternal emanation aspect of it, and this one is going to be almost like pure speculation on my part.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything written on it, but this is the only thing that kind of makes sense to me, and it is a little bit different than how Bishop Barron talks about, like, oh, the presence of God is a source of joy for some and a source of pain for others. So the way that I understand it is, if God is eternally emanating an individual, then because he can't change, to then bring about that annihilation would be a contradiction in the same way of A and not A.
What?
Because now God is going from eternally emanating that individual to, at the same time, eternally not emanating that individual.
Okay. I think that's a very compelling argument. The problem is that like destroys, for example, like, I don't know, God eternally sustaining the earth, and then when it's the end of times and the earth goes away, he no longer eternally sustains
New
the
heaven
earth.
and new earth.
But like, in terms of like the old heaven and the old earth, so he's like eternally sustaining old earth, and then he no longer does that.
So that's different than annihilation. And annihilation, at least as I understand it philosophically and theologically speaking, is more than just going from existing to not existing. It's total, complete non-existence is my understanding of it. Now,
sure, but couldn't God?
If someone was to say, like, hey, who, God, like, they're like, for example, people will put out that animals are not in heaven. This is like one area I do disagree with Aquinas on. He thought dogs aren't in heaven. But if we were created in the same sense of like animals with a naturalistic soul that could only exist naturalistically and didn't have this supernatural form of existence of an afterlife. Then annihilation is not the same thing as what you mean, like, hey, I exist and then I die. Annihilation would have to be that philosophical definition of annihilation of complete and total non-existence.
Why couldn't it be God sustains you in the timeline for the times that you exist, and then because you don't choose him in the end, he stops sustaining you and you go out of existence?
That has to do with, and if you're going through Plato, like I've heard you saying, I can't wait till you get to.
No, that's Justin. Justin said that.
Oh,
I've read
okay.
I haven't read all of Plato, but I've read a bit.
Yeah.
I've read quite a bit.
Okay. Plato makes a very interesting argument in an almost purely naturalistic sense for incarnation / eternality of the soul.
I'm familiar.
I do. Okay. So that's part of it for me, but like, if we're willing to grant, just for the sake of conversation right now, that annihilation, because as you bring this up, maybe I do need to look into it a little bit more.
Okay.
But if annihilation is a true contradiction for God to do, the aspect or the source of suffering, in my perspective and my opinion, is this is an individual who rejects God, who is existence, wants nothing to do with existence. So in a sense, like you're saying, they want that annihilation, but they also want to have existed, in the sense of like, hey, I don't want to exist anymore, but I want to have existed. I want to have met my girlfriend. I want to have had the children that I've had. I want to have done all of the things that I did, but I don't want to be associated with you at all. Because remember, the definition of hell is one who total and completely rejects God. As they are trying to move away from God as the source of their existence, while still maintaining some aspect of their existence, that creates a contradiction in the sense of, I don't know if you've ever tried it, but I've tried it a few times, and maybe it's just me. I've tried to seriously think of a square circle, like what an actual square circle would look like.
I've dabbled.
But whenever I do like a sincere effort in trying to think on that contradiction, I get a little bit of a mental pain. And
I mean, for me, like the thought just kind of comes apart. But so, sorry. Okay. I want to let you finish, but like a contradiction in what? A contradiction in the desire of the person,
they want to,
or like, because that's totally fine. But
so the person is actively trying to maintain some aspect of existence while cutting themselves off from existence. So they're trying to both exist and not exist.
Okay, but surely if God is existence, the just thing to do would be to, even though this person's desire is incoherent, surely the just thing to do would be to allow them to exist for the time that they existed, and then to just stop sustaining them. Like he stopped sustaining a whole bunch of things. He stopped sustaining like the Hindenburg past the point.
Well, and that gets into the question that you had raised earlier about like Socrates existing 2,000 years ago, about the temporal parts.
Yeah.
And I think I do have an answer for that, but I want to give a little bit more research on that particular question.
The question I'm going to ask you, by the way, because I've thought about this more too. I want to know what is different about what God does with his sustaining at different times. Like if God had temporal parts, what would be different between your model and that model is what I'm curious of. But it's okay if you said you want to do more research into it. I'm just like letting you. I'll like pre-let you know that's the question I'm wondering.
Okay, yeah, because the understanding that I have, like, I've never considered the idea of temporal parts for God, and so trying to understand what that would look like as I understand it, I definitely need to do a lot more research. I was a lot more familiar with some of the common objections for the eternal conscious torment of hell.
Sure.
But yeah, like I personally think, and maybe this has changed everyone's opinion on me, but I personally think once you understand that, especially that two, like what the elements of 2, 4, and 5, that there are misunderstandings of the nature of hell, at least within Catholicism, it then becomes less of a question of why would God do this and more of why on earth would anyone choose hell, which leads me into that hope for an empty hell that I was talking about that Bishop Barron and I have.
Okay. Do you see hell as being like retributive?
No.
Hmm.
I do not. Like, because I do not believe hell as God enacting something onto someone, and more of like I said, so my understanding and my personal theory of hell and the source of that suffering and why we suffer in hell is because of that idea of it being in the individual is trying to bring about a contradictive state, which I imagine would be painful.
Okay. So if it's not retributive, I think the annihilationism problem gets much worse if it's not retributive, because typically the way that you might want to try to avoid the annihilationism is you want to say, no, they deserve some sort of punishment. So it would be denying them their just deserts to give them some sort of punishment. But if you're saying hell is not a punishment, that it just seems to become like unnecessary suffering at that point.
So, and that gets into, like I was talking about, like the hope for an empty hell, because to touch on that a little bit, the idea of it is hell is such an outrageous and extremely irrational decision to make, and it's hard to believe of any individual rationally making that choice, that no one would choose it. It's kind of like, if I was to ask you, is it possible for every person to pick option A, even though it's statistically unlikely? Is it possible out of two options, if everyone was given a poll, is it statistically possible for everyone to pick one option? And especially if that option is something like, you will get $1 billion and there is no negative repercussions, and option B is you will go into $1 billion in debt.
Yeah, you get your balls chopped off. Somebody comes over here and kicks you really hard. Yeah.
So you would think and hope that everyone would pick option A. Even though you know that statistically there might be someone, or it's possible for someone to pick option B, you would still hope that everyone picks option A. And so that's what the hope for an empty hell is that hell is that option B that is so insane once you really and truly understand it, that it doesn't seem like anyone would ever pick it. And so we have the hope that everyone would pick option A, and option A genuinely and truly is available to everyone, even someone like Christopher Hitchens, who's one of the individuals you had mentioned about, like, even if I saw God, I'd say no. I still think that there is the possibility for him to recognize the error in that statement, if it truly is an error.
So, because, like, say you get there in front of him and he's like, you need to believe that, okay, like, either you get fucking tortured forever, or you get to come live with me in, like, pleasure. And you have to think that the fact that you're being given this option is good. I'm not sure if I would think that the option is good, but obviously I'm going to choose like not torture.
Yeah, so that gets into like the nature of the option. So like, say for example, I'm hosting a big party, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have any right to come into my house.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter how great the party is, right?
Yep.
But if I invite you, you now have the option to either remain out of the house and not be a part of the party, or be a part of the party. So when God created us originally, before the fall of man, we all had entry passes to that party. A lot of people think the fall then meant that our default state is hell. Well, no, that's not the case. Hell is more than just being outside of the house. It is looking into the house and saying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Like, to an extreme extent.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just like not convinced that there are such people who would be like, yeah, torture me forever. But at that point, like the problem of hell just kind of doesn't exist, because like hell just kind of doesn't exist. If the bar
That's
for
my
getting
hope.
into
Yeah.
heaven, sure. Well, then it doesn't seem like this is, if the position that you would arrive at then is like universalism, and then at that point, like the problem of hell doesn't really apply. I think that there are,
Just to nitpick a
Yeah,
little bit,
go for
this
it.
is different than universalism. Universalism is the claim that people will go to hell and then leave.
I thought it was just
my
the claim that everyone goes to heaven eventually.
That's the key phrase, eventually.
But some people are able to like, start out there.
Well, no, it's more of
It has a definition
so-
in the paper. Universalism avoids the problem of hell posed, or the problem of evil posed by hell, by either denying outright that anyone will suffer in hell, or denying that anyone would reside in hell for an eternity.
So the way that the church defines universalism and what the church has declared the heresy of universalism is the second one.
Oh, okay, sure.
So at least, so for me, from my Catholic framework, when I hear universalism, that's what I'm thinking of. I've heard some people phrase the hope for an empty hell as hopeful universalism, but there hasn't been like a, to my knowledge, within the Catholic theological tradition of an actual title for this, because it is a fairly new idea, but it does have some pretty good foundational support all the way even back to St. Augustine. But it wasn't like framed as such until Balthazar and Bishop Barron is kind of helping popularize the idea.
Okay. So then at that point, I think like the place where we kind of end up is that, like, I agree, there isn't really like a problem of hell in this view, but that's because like there just isn't hell in this view.
Or I hope that there isn't, but yeah.
I mean, okay.
And
let's say that there
well,
was.
So
how would you? Yeah, go for it.
So in that situation, then let's the individual that would be in hell in this type of situation. This is an individual who, to try to bring it grounded a little bit. This is an individual, let's say, who is raised up in a loving family, and it like you can see that they are raised up in a loving family. They have no reason to reject or hate their family members. But then this individual gets so self-centered that when they see the mother doing something for a sibling, even though they're getting what they want and everything that they need as well, like they're not suffering for anything, they're just mad because they want what their sibling is getting, to the extent that their sibling has nothing. And this envy, this rage continues to build up into this individual until finally they cut themselves off from the family. And now they don't have anything that the family was providing for them because they cut themselves off themselves. Like the family is standing right there, like, no, this is for you, but they're not accepting it.
I guess, wait, could you do the analogy a bit quicker? I like zoned out halfway through.
Sorry. Imagine an individual who cuts themselves off from a loving family.
Okay, yes.
And the family is standing right there, literally banging on the door of this individual, begging to give them everything that they need while they are sitting there starving. But this individual refuses to accept the help simply because they reject their family.
Okay. I mean, why would it be unjust to then come in and like, I don't know, like force the person either like pop the person out of existence or like force the person to I don't know, like eat food or, you know, not suffer.
So that's where that, like, then the question then becomes, well, then what is the source of the suffering? And that's why, like I said, maybe I do need to do a little bit more looking into why it would be a contradiction for God to pop the individual out of existence.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, wait, here's something. I think a lot of theists, especially with regards to things like skeptical theism, thanks. A lot of people with regard to like skeptical theism want to invoke analogies that are similar to like, you know, like a parent and a child. You know, it's like when we ask these dumb questions like, you know, God, why won't you cure cancer? Silly nonsense like that, you know. And we don't understand it. It's like a child not understanding why a parent does the things that they do. Like why, you know, the child can't eat candy all day or something like that. But then if we were to hold that analogy consistently, then it seems like the same thing is going on in hell. Like even if there's like immense suffering brought about by the dispositions of the soul in hell, I mean, like, I don't know, like picture you're like a parent and your kid is like cutting themselves or something like that. You're gonna fucking like do something, right? Like even though you know, you're gonna direct them in like a different direction, you're gonna like get them the help they need. It seems like God would have that sort of like role or like obligation to like do something because he's like so much greater than we are.
Right. And I do agree with you on that. One of the things that I always understood, and like I said, you know, and I think the biggest issue for me is that question on the annihilation aspect. I came to that realization of like, oh, you know, it would be a contradiction, and I didn't put too much thinking into it. And you helped me realize that maybe there's more to it.
What? I can't fucking believe that saying the phrase that I just said got the live restricted for 10 minutes. Fucking ridiculous. Okay, whatever. Whatever, dude. You know what I'm gonna do? No, I'm kidding. Whoa. Yeah, continue.
But one of the, and I haven't dabbled a whole lot in psychology, but one of the things, to my understanding of psychology and helping people going through, you know, addictions or whatever they're struggling with.
Yeah.
They are, we can't help them until they want to be helped. It doesn't matter how much we want to or how much we provide the resources to them or, you know, whatever is needed to help them out. We can't help them until they want to be helped. And I think personally that the same applies even to God. Now, I know that there might be some people out there, even theists, who might disagree, but I think, at least within the Catholic worldview, that kind of like, and that's why I was like, maybe I need to relook into like how exactly God's contradiction, like inability to do contradictions when it comes to not only our existence, but our free will comes into play. Because to me, I was viewing both situations as God is giving us our free will to such an extent that if he was to force his help onto us, it would be also another contradiction of that same capacity. So I would need, like I said, relook into it, because it's something that seemed intuitive to me, and it was a blind spot until you kind of brought up, like, well, what about this area as far as like the temporal parts and things like that, that I'm like, okay, maybe I do need to relook into this a little bit deeper than I initially thought.
Okay. And that's like totally fair, but so God is like perfectly persuasive. So what I would take that to mean is that God would have the ability to persuade anybody, or like, I don't know, like sit down in the afterlife and have a conversation with anybody for like infinite duration if need be, to try to like soften their heart and get them to accept the truth. And he'd be able to do so with like infinite persuasive ability. So presumably like that would be like a good thing to do. And you know, sure, like it could be true that there are some people where it would be like a logical contradiction or something like that, for them to be persuaded, so God can't persuade those people. Sure, whatever. You know, maybe. But then,
so what I was referring to is your hypothetical situation of what type of individual would be in hell in this worldview that I presented.
Yeah.
What you're bringing up is part of the reason why I have that hope that no one would be in hell. Because I agree with you that God would be able to provide all the necessary information required to the individual, but it would then become dependent less on the information and more on the disposition of the individual.
Sure. But I also think that people who are persuasive can persuade others to change their dispositions. So yeah, like again, it seems like it would be like insanely difficult to go to hell. Like you'd have to like resist God's attempts to persuade you out of it.
Yeah, that's what hell is. The resisting of God's attempt to persuade you out of it. Like it's like there's a little bit more technical aspects of it, but I think as a simplified statement, I agree with you. That's what hell is, in my understanding, is such a complete and total rejection of God that you reject even his attempt to persuade you out of it.
Okay, so here's another objection. I have no idea what the point of this planet is. It seems like God could fucking like spawn in all the souls and hit us with this question in like a room, like you want the torture or you want the non-torture, which route, soul?
So,
and then you just like talk to God for some I don't know, duration, not to invoke like time words or whatever, but you know, you just have like you have like some sort of like conversation with him, where you are able to make like an informed decision, like one-on-one, about whether or not you want to get like tortured forever or whether you want to, I don't know, experience joy.
If you're ever curious into how I got a lot of the ideas outside of Thomas Aquinas, the books that I read in while I was growing up were a series of school books by Father John Lau, and he does bring up this question of like, why does God create temporal beings? Why did he create humans when he could have just only created angels and that would have been perfectly fine?
Not even that. Just like why create the earth instead of like a bunch of souls and then give like the hell test to them at the very beginning?
That's what the angels are, is souls without a material body. So,
sure. And then, sure. I guess that is consistent with your theology that they also make a choice as to where they want to go.
Yeah. So that goes into that aspect of that I was talking about, like Satan made his decision with all of the knowledge, including what hell would feel like and be like. Like there was no surprise for him after he made that choice. And so because of that, one of the only ways that an individual can change their mind and or repent is if new information is provided to them. So, for example, if you did an act and then you later on learned that you shouldn't have done that act, you repent of it. But you only repented of it because of a change of new information. So because of that, angels and demons don't repent because they don't get new information that would enable them to repent because they already have the information. Now, let's say you did this act, you're told why you shouldn't have done it, so that's new information, but you're still like, nope, I think I made the right choice. That doesn't affect my decision. You don't repent. So Satan and the angels are never in a state of, oh, if only I knew what I knew back then, my choices would be different.
Wait, sorry. So they are temporal or they're not?
They are not temporal. What I'm saying is, like, again, using like temporal language to try to help build this analogy, that they are not in a situation where they have the ability to repent because there's no new information that would help them repent.
Yeah, sure.
They already have.
I mean,
so for us, we have that ability to repent. And because we have that ability to repent, we can live as horrible a life as we do here on earth, and still make the correct choice at the very end, thereby potentially enabling us to have a quote unquote better opportunity to go into heaven than what the angels and demons did.
Okay. Picture, if you will, that you have knowledge that you're about to like impregnate your wife, and you know 100% certainty it was revealed to you by Allah that if you do this, your child is going to be in like extreme fucking agony for their entire life. There will be no joy. They will not be able to live a life outside of like the machines in the hospital. There will be no meaning. It will be misery. Me personally, I would just not have that child. Why would God create people that he knows are going to end up in hell?
In my personal theological worldview, I don't think he does.
Oh, okay. So, sure. Then the problem of hell just doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, that's part of my hope, yes. And I have that hope that he doesn't create people that would go into hell.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't deny that there is that possibility and that it is real. As in, like, it is a real choice that people can make. But I do think that it's such an insane choice to make. I have the hope that nobody would make it.
Well, but I mean, God seems to have like control over this with his like infinite knowledge, that it would appear like God.
That's going to get into predestination, which is about a 2-hour-long subject.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Well, do you have anything else?
Nope. That was it. I hope that was at least satisfactory.
Well,
but yeah, like
kind of. I mean, like in the sense that it seems like in your view, there just like isn't hell, that like nobody is actually in like this state of like torment, or at least I mean, if there is somebody in the state of torment, then like the problem of evil, wherein like God could have just not made those people, seems to arise. But
yeah, and that gets to like I said, I'll need to look into like that annihilation aspect of things,
or just like not creating them in the first place. Yeah.
But yeah, like if hell is empty, as I hope it is, then yeah, God didn't create anyone that would go to hell.
Yep. But then at that
same
point,
time,
you'd also be rejecting E1.
Well, I do acknowledge that like Satan and the other demons are in hell.
Oh, sure.
So like,
why not just not create them?
So that's where, like, as far as like in that aspect of things, there's, and I'll need to relook into it, but like, Thomas Aquinas does say that like, there's still good about Satan. Like, a very popular idea within Christianity comes from like an almost Calvinistic idea of total depravity, that Satan has no goodness within him. But if Satan exists and God is existing and God is goodness, and that means to exist is a good. So even by the very act of Satan existing, there's still some aspect of goodness about him that God can still bring about, even though Satan's rejecting him.
I mean, sure, right? But okay, like we can go back to like the child who's gonna like suffer their entire
Mhm.
lives. Let's say that there's, you know,
At
one.
that point, though, especially like in the case of Satan, like in your analogy, and this is
Mm,
part of why it doesn't track, is in your analogy, I'm making the choice for the child.
you're making the choice to either create the child or to not create the child.
But the child, and in that sense, I'm making the choice. Am I going to create this child to be in pain? But in this situation, I create the child, and the child makes the choice.
Sure, yeah. Let's say the child, you know, gets in like a horrible biking accident young because
Well, not even an accident. It's less of an accident. That like
they choose not to
it,
wear their helmet because they're in their
more than that.
hubris.
No, more than that. Like there is no accidental aspect for, like, you don't trip and stumble into hell. Like, it is such an intense, willful, and complete ownership of a decision that any accidental or happenstance analogy isn't going to
Okay,
capture.
sure. We can do it like this then. You know, if you have this child that they'll like pour acid on their body frequently for the rest of their life, and they'll be in like horrible suffering that is like self-inflicted. I would not have that child.
So, and the child knows.
Yep, fully
Okay.
sentient. Yeah, I simply, even though this child is choosing the agony, I would not have that child.
Yeah. And that would then get into, and I know this is like a bullet that a lot of people make or bite, is the question that I would then ask is, well, what good can come from the existence of that child? If absolutely no good can come from the existence of that child, then yes, I would agree.
Even if there was like some good that came from it, even like some like profound good that came from it, it's hard for me to think that that's the right thing to do. Even if like this child and what they do inspires like 1 million people to turn their lives around, it's hard for me to think that having that child would be the right thing to do.
And I agree. Like it's a hard thing and something that I'm still thinking through. Absolutely. But as far as like I don't know, like to me, it feels like that if we're like, this might almost sound hand wavy, but it almost feels like when people are bringing up, especially like the analogy that you're using, or the argument as far as like, well, why, you know, or basically trying to blame God for people existing in hell, so to speak. It almost feels like we're trying to shirk away from the responsibility of the fact that we are responsible for our own choices. And I don't know, maybe that's a me problem, but I don't know. Like, can we really, like, I don't know, it to me, and I understand somewhat on where people are coming from. And maybe I do need to do something on like how I understand predestination and God's omniscience and free will at some point. But even though God knows what we will do, we are still responsible for what we do. And it's our, like, to kind of do a Cliff Notes version of it, we help create reality to be what it is by our choices. Like, God's foreknowledge of reality isn't what makes reality be what it is. It's our actions that help make reality be what it is. and God knows it. And I know that there's the question of like, there's like arguments against it that I think I can answer, but in the time frame that I've got, because I know I've been up here for a while. But I do think that we are responsible for our own actions, and a lot of these, like, well, God is to blame for hell or for people being in hell, etc. I think it removes the responsibility that we have in the sense that we have choices.
Okay. I guess I'm just not convinced that really addresses like the brunt of the problem, which is that I have this intuition very strongly that, I don't know, like if I knew my child would grow up to be Adolf Hitler, even though my child would be responsible for their own actions, that there would be something like gravely immoral about me having that child. Even though I did not take that action, I still think that it would be wrong to do that.
And I guess there could be an argument made there. I'm not sure if I disagree, but that might be a conversation you and I need to have another day.
Sure, that's fine.
But yeah.
Well, hey, got anything else?
Nope, that was it.
You should read through the rest of the. You should read through the rest of the argument. I think it outlines. It's been a while. It's been like over a year since I've read this article, but I think it outlines like all of the positions.
Yeah, I'll definitely do a deeper read, but when I was going through it the other day, just kind of quickly skimming through it, I saw that and I was like, oh yeah, like if this is their starting premises on why hell has a problem, then it falls apart just on the fact that I reject 3 of these elements off the bat.
Sure, but okay. The problem of hell would still exist. Well, first of all, I mean, the author argues that the problem of hell arises for every model of hell, but I mean, setting that aside, you might just hold it to be in the same way like the problem of evil is something that only applies to the all good God. You know, you might just say, well, you know, it's still a problem for like the views that hold it, who are like committed to these things, and the people that aren't committed to this, like the argument's just not for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, but I've been in this space for a long time, and a lot of the arguments against the eternal conscious torment of hell I've heard. And I just wanted to make sure that I some of the problems you had was at least within the right direction, or at least the direction I was thinking of.
Well, yeah, sure. I think that there's like worst models of hell, and then there's like models that are like increasingly more justifiable.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that, I don't know if there's a position on hell other than like universalism that like really avoids the critiques, but I definitely think like there's like for sure like a hierarchy where it's like, okay, you start off with like, okay, you're tortured forever for not believing in God, and it's like, well, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah,
and then you know, tortured forever for doing wrong in your life, that seems wrong still. And then it's like, okay, you know, you're given like the opportunity to join God and like say you're sorry or something like that. But yeah, regardless, thanks so much for coming on up.
Absolutely.
Even C.S. Lewis described his own ideas as whirling contradictions, although I don't think that that's a very good counter-argument. Hyperocean, thanks so much for the super chat. Apocastasis is the only based eschatology. What is that? Oh, sure, it's like universalism. Yeah, based? Yeah, no, I agree with this. I think universalism is like the only defensible one. And for those who don't know, Universalism in the literature typically refers to the view that everybody at least ends up in heaven. Some universalists think that you never go to hell at all. Some think that you go to hell for some amount of time and then you go to heaven. But yeah, I think universalism is the only thing that makes even like a little bit of sense. Oh, wait. Yo, where are you going, Moniker? Couldn't wait like 3 minutes. Okay, dude. Yeah, I literally invited him and he's gone. Okay. God, thanks so much for the super chat. The beings I work for created religion and Buddhism. Without them, barbaric humans would have tons of cults warring. You humans are garbage without discipline and rules and are easy to manipulate. Aw, sweet. A schizo thread. See, I paid $10 and the beings restricted this guy for 10 minutes. They have such control of reality. It's kind of annoying, actually. Fuck, dude, you really sniped my live. Dylan, thanks so much for the super chat. Would you ever do a prove to me that the Christian God exists with Parker? I saw you sent the super chat in, so I was like, does Parker still do those? It doesn't look like, I don't think, as far as I know, like Parker doesn't do those anymore. I mean, you know, and can you fucking blame him? I disavow those comments. Those comments weren't me. But I mean, yeah, I'd be like totally open. But frankly, I mean, if Parker ever goes back to the religion topic, he's making a horrible financial decision. He's making a fucking bag right now. He's making like generational wealth right now. The fuck? That would be crazy for him to do anything other than the politics topic. Like, he has like an economics degree. Parker's not going to go back to the... and like, who could blame him? You know? He's passionate about religion. He's passionate about politics. He makes way the fuck more from the politics topic. There's nothing wrong with that, you know? Can't blame him. And to be clear, I'm not saying that to like shame him, you know, like this is like me with other topics. One of the reasons why I do this topic as opposed to like niche philosophical topics is because I want to grow the audience. You know, I want to grow like the platform. I want to make this like a full-time income one day. And to do that, you got to grind the shit that you're interested in that people want to like pay you for. Otherwise, there's no full-time income to come out of it. So I don't know. You gotta. I mean, like, no disrespect by those comments. But anyway, hey, I just released a new video on my YouTube channel. It's titled "Another Day, Another Christian Crash Out." Let's watch the preview. Like the comments
dude.
about
up, dude.
Oh shit, he's so
Why
fucking
do you
mad.
keep doing this, bro?
He's so mad, dude. Calm down.
Just like, dude, just shut the fuck
Seriously,
up and let me
take
speak,
like a deep
dude.
breath.
This is not how
It's really
dialogue
gonna be
works.
okay. Hey, how's it going? Yep, it's on my YouTube. Go check it out. My YouTube is linked in my my link tree. You know, it's in my bio, and my YouTube is just allegedly Ian. Go give it a like, go give it a comment, do all the things that are good, helpful, and necessary for the algorithm. We have a few more supers. Grimlock, thank you so much for the $20 for the hydration reminder. Let's hydrate. The video is going to have one of three titles. It could be called Another Day, Another Christian Crash Out. It could be called Christian Starts Yelling in Record Time. one of the settings on YouTube is that you can put forward like 3 separate titles, and then it can choose the one that performs the best. But hey, if you want to get started with philosophy, but you have no idea where to start, totally valid. Consider joining the book club. The book club happens in my Discord, discord.gg/allegedlyian. Seriously, I'd love to see all of you there. We're reading Michael Huemer's Knowledge, Reality, and Value. We're reading the 12th chapter. It's tomorrow at 8 p.m. EST. But Ian, I haven't read any of the first 11 chapters. It doesn't matter. Every single chapter is able to stand on its own. It's beginner friendly. It's literally an introductory book to philosophy. You could be there. You could have read nothing about philosophy prior to this and then do the audio. You could listen to it on the audiobook, the 12th chapter, and be there at the book club tomorrow. We want to see you there. Anyway, I love all of you. I disavow that comment about Buddhism. The Buddha explicitly said to question his logic and find your own conclusions instead of blindly believing. Yeah, I mean, that seems like something he would say. Anyway, we're doing like the roast of Michael Huemer at this book club because of his bad opinions about personal identity. Boo! Anyway, see you all later. Go check out the newest video. GameCube Daniel, thanks